Welcome back to Strawberry Ink. Today, we're turning to one of the most painful, complicated, and misrepresented mass shootings of the last decade. The 2019 STEM school Highlands Ranch shooting in Colorado. This is not just about bullets and bloodshed, it's about how identity, fear, and societal failure collided in a suburban school. The last Colorado school shooting I covered was the Columbine shooting. That was a pretty informative episode. And something that I did not mention, but I just found out recently, is where the accomplices of the two shooters were held to serve their sentences. Philip Duran was held at the Colorado State Prison in Sterling, and Mark Maines was held at the Canyon City State Penitentiary. That is where they served their sentences. Two prisons that are both used for hidden inmates like them. Now, what I will be discussing today, it's about two students, Alec McKinney and Devin Erickson. It's also about their queerness. It's about the way a white, upper middle class community responded with judgment rather than introspection. It's about how a system built on alt norms punished one kid not only for what they did, but for what they were. On May 7th, 2019, the STEM school was plunged into chaos. Kendrick Castillo was killed when he lunged at Devin Erickson to try to stop the attack. 8 others were injured. 6 by the shooters, 2 by armed security. All survived. The shooters were arrested on site and taken to the Douglas County Sheriff's Office before being booked into the county jail. Kendrick Castillo's funeral visitation was held on May 16th at the Horand and McInerney Funeral Home in Centennial, Colorado. The following day, Mass was held at the St. Mary Catholic Church in Littleton, where Columbine happened. He was afterwards buried at the Seven Stones Catfield Cemetery. He was 18 years old. Kendrick bled to death at the scene. An autopsy by Douglas County Coroner's Office confirmed it. 8 people were hospitalized, 5 at Littleton Adventist, 1 at Colorado South Campus, and 2 at Sky Ridge. All were released by May 12th. A day later, the shooters were brought before Judge Teresa Slade. Alec was assigned attorney Ara Ohanian. Devin was assigned to Julia Stansel. The district attorney, George Brouchler, announced his intent to prosecute both to the fullest. Neither was granted bond. They were each charged with 48 felonies, multiple counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, arson, burglary, endangerment, bodily injury, interference, and firearms offenses. All this was before the facts had even been fully sorted. This was not justice, it was a spectacle. And here's where it gets worse. Alec McKinney, a transgender boy. But the system did not care about that. The courts listed him as Maya, his dead name. And the media followed suit, calling him a woman, a girl, a female shooter. It was cruel, deliberate misgendering. The media, the courts, the headlines, they could not wait to dehumanize him. Because in their eyes, his transness was the real threat. We are still seeing this to this day. In Wisconsin, the media tried to have people once again shame the trans community, blame them for shootings. When Samantha Rupnow committed a mass shooting in her Christian school in Madison, people were saying she was a transgender girl when she was not. She was actually a cis girl. How offensive. The media, even years before that, tried to paint Audrey Cole as the representation of the trans community so people could continue seeing trans people as evil. Trans people are humans. They are not monsters. Maybe some are, but in general, they are not monsters. They are humans looking for positivity, looking to have an easier time living. Unlike what the certain super conservative cis community has given them. Anyways, on the other hand, Devin Erickson, who uses they them pronouns, was labeled a boy, a young man, by the same media because, again, the story was already written. White suburban America was not ready to see queerness without fear. On May 15th, 2019, both Alec and Devin pleaded not guilty to all charges before Judge Jeffrey Holmes. Alec took a plea deal. On February 7th, 2020, he pleaded guilty to 17 charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy, attempted murder, and weapons offenses. The deal required him to testify against Devin. His other charges were dismissed. On July 24th, 2020, Alec was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after completing 40 years in prison for the murder, another 38 years for conspiracy, and then the system showed just how little it valued his identity by sending him to the Denver Women's Correctional Facility. A trans boy sent to a women's prison for safety, for bureaucracy, for cruelty. You tell me. Devin's trial began on May 31st, 2021. On June 15th, they were found guilty on 46 charges. 2 were dropped, sentence enhancers. A jury of 12 people, 12 members, along with 4 alternates serving as extras, rendered the verdict. Judge Slade again presided. On September 17, 2021, Devin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 496.5 to 1,282 years, depending on how you add up the years for assault and attempted murder. A number meant not just to punish, but to annihilate. After testifying, Alec was sent to a women's prison in Denver. Then Devin was sent to that men's state prison in Canyon City. Neither were placed where their identities were respected. Only where the state feels most comfortable silencing them. Neither shooter was pardoned or commuted. Alec tried to withdraw his plea. Judge Holmes refused. Alec appealed to the Colorado Supreme Court. Rejected. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear him. Devin's appeals also failed. Judge Slade refused to vacate their conviction or resentence them. The Colorado Court of Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court rejected their requests in 2022 and 2023. Before we close, there's one more layer to this tragedy that deserves attention: the aftermath and the search for accountability. Not just from the shooters, but from the very institution that was supposed to protect its students. In 2021, John and Maria Castillo, parents of Kendrick Castillo, who died after heroically lunging at one of the shooters, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against STEM school Highlands Ranch. They did not want justice, they wanted answers. Their claim, filed under Colorado's Claire Davis School Safety Act, alleged that the school failed to act on clear warning signs, that it ignored potential threats, that it did not do enough to keep its students safe. In February 2022, a judge ordered the school to pay the Castillos $387,000, the maximum payout allowed under the act. But the Castillos refused the money. Why? Because this was not about compensation. This was about truth. They wanted sealed records opened. They wanted the public to see what had been hidden, because they believed that only through transparency could other families be spared the same pain. They were not alone. Brendan Biley, one of the students who physically helped stop the shooting, filed a claim of his own. He planned to serve in the U.S. Marines, but the trauma from that day left him battling anxiety and PTSD. It changed the course of his life. The Loftblad family filed a claim on behalf of their son, a senior during the shooting, who had to hide in his classroom and now lives with deep emotional scars. The Sturquell family filed claims for both of their children, who were also students at the time. One had to lock the door to protect the others because her teacher froze. Both kids are still in treatment for the trauma they endured. All of these claims fell under the same law, the Claire Davis Act, and all pointed to one theme: a school that failed to protect, failed to prepare, and failed to acknowledge its own responsibility. When we talk about accountability, we must include institutions, not just individuals, because when the warning signs go ignored, when security lapses become normalized, and when administrators prioritize image over action, they're not just complicit, they're culpable. And before we wrap, it's important to connect this episode to the broader pattern of violence and institutional accountability, especially here in Colorado. If you turned to my most recent episode, we explored the tragic 2021 mass shooting at a King Soopers grocery store in Boulder. 10 lives were taken in that attack, and once again, civil action followed the criminal charges. In that case, families of the victims have filed lawsuits against Sturm, Roger & Co., the gun manufacturer that produced the AR-556 pistol used in the massacre. They argued that Roger unlawfully marked the weapon as a military-style rifle in violation of federal law, specifically the National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act. According to these lawsuits, Roger's advertising essentially glamorized lethality, making the weapon more appealing to someone intent on mass violence. One such lawsuit, Getz v. Storm, Roger & Co., was brought by the son of Suzanne Fountain, a victim of the Boulder shooting. Roger tried to push the case into federal court, but in 2024, a judge ruled that the case would stay in state court, clearing the path for victims' families to pursue justice on their own terms. This happened in Colorado too, and just like with STEM School in Highlands Ranch, grieving families are left not only to mourn but to fight for accountability, for transparency, and for change. These civil suits represent something deeper than legal claims. They are demand for responsibility in a system that often feels indifferent, because when the institutions that enable violence go unchecked, whether schools, manufacturers, or legislators, the cycle continues. There is no denying the horror of what happened at STEM School, but there's also no denying the horror of what followed. White suburban America, intellectual, liberal, conservative, educated, failed to protect its queer youth. It shamed them, misgendered them, locked them away, and pretended that pronouns were more dangerous than a gun. Let's be clear, Alec McKinney pulled the trigger, so did Devin Erickson. They were responsible for their choices, but this episode was not just born in a vacuum. It was born in a world where being queer still means being disposable, dangerous, or invisible. Where being different can mean being demonized. We cannot talk about the STEM school shooting without talking about the violence of misgendering, of media narratives, of institutional blindness, and until that changes, we're just wanting for the next massacre to repeat. This has been Strawberry Ink. Stay safe, stay bold, and always speak truth. Have a good rest of your day.